Hey everybody, how's it going? So Heidi here with some updates to the Successful Fashion Designer podcast. I wanted to record this short little episode to tell you about some changes that we're making with the show and also open the doors up to get feedback and input from you guys. You know, everything that I do with Successful Fashion Designer is to help serve you, to help you get ahead in your career, to help you make it in this industry. And I love getting feedback, input, ideas, whether it's critical, constructive, things you think I could do better, things you love. I do love hearing from you. So let me go through some of the updates, tell you about some of the ideas we're thinking about playing with. I'll remind you that everything that we do with the Successful Fashion Designer, whether it's the podcast or tutorials or any other content, you know, we're constantly trying to tweak it to make it better for you. So none of these changes are ever, you know, fully permanent or set in stone or set in concrete, but we're trying to continually make things better and enhance the experience and the content that we deliver for you. So here's what we're looking at. We're going to see how this goes for a little while. We may change things back. We may, you know, continue to tweak it. As I said, this is sort of a living and breathing thing. But this is what we're looking at right now for the Successful Fashion Designer podcast. We're going to be switching to interviews on the podcast published every other week. We've been doing weekly for about a year now, which is insane. I can't believe we've almost hit a year. And we're going to switch that schedule to a new interview show every other week. But we're still doing tons of other content, and we're going to play around with some new types of content that I think will continue to serve you guys in ways that best help you with your success in the fashion industry. So in addition to an every other week episode, I'm going to start doing some mailbag episodes. What is a mailbag episode, you might say? Here's the thing. My inbox gets flooded with so many questions from you guys about how do I do this with my fashion brand? What do you suggest for this? What's your advice on this? And I simply don't have the capacity to answer every single email. It would take up all my time if I spent my time answering every single email, answering all your questions and giving you my advice. The other thing is that when I write an email to you with all that advice and answering that question, you're the only one that sees it. You're the only one that benefits from it. And chances are there's tons of other people out there that have the same questions, that want the same advice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start answering these questions in a mailbag episode. And that way, everybody gets to hear the advice. Everybody gets to hear the answers to the questions. And I'm really excited to start doing this. So what can you do to participate in this? Well, if you've sent me a question recently, I've already started tagging these in my inbox, and I'm going to start doing these episodes soon. So listen for your question to get answered on the mailbag episode. Alternatively, if you haven't sent in a question and you do want to send in a question, you can email me anytime at podcast@successfulfashiondesigner.com with your question. Be sure to give me as much background information as possible for me to give you the best answer as possible, but send in maybe your exact situation, what you're working on, what you're struggling with, you know, what's your 1 or 2 point question, what type of advice you're looking for, and I'll choose the best ones to answer in the mailbag episode on the show. All right, so that's something new that we're going to introduce in addition to the every other week interview shows for the podcast. On top of that, we are playing around with creating more behind the scenes content on our Patreon page. If you haven't checked the Patreon page out, it's at patreon.com/SFD, and I'll link to all these resources in the show notes. But this is a great way for you to get more bite-sized, smaller snippets, pieces of content that are a little bit more behind the scenes. So this varies from, you know, things that sort of thoughts on what's going on in the industry from my perspective. It's some behind the scenes content that we may capture either before or after the podcast episode that doesn't go in the actual episode. It doesn't quite belong in the formal interview, but it's more behind the scenes. And so check that out. We're going to start putting more sort of smaller bite-sized pieces of content there. And again, I'm always open to hearing what you guys like, what you want more of, what you don't like. You know, I'm open. I have a pretty thick skin, so please be transparent with your feedback, any thoughts or ideas you have. Again, you can always email me any of that stuff related to the show at podcast@successfulfashiondesigner.com. The last thing that we're working on is a way to categorize the episodes to help send you to the exact episode that's perfect for you based on where you are right now. Here's what happens all the time. I chat with various people in my audience on the phone pretty regularly. I chat with students who are in some of my programs. I chat with other designers just to learn about what they're working on and what their challenges are. And oftentimes when I'm talking to someone one-on-one, they ask me, oh, what do you suggest for this? Or I'm really struggling with this thing. And I'm able to point them to an exact episode or 2 or 3, say, listen to this. All of your questions are answered in this episode. What happens is like 3 or 4 days later, they email me with, oh my gosh, Heidi, that was exactly what I needed. That was pure gold. Here's the thing though. I don't have the capacity to hand deliver you an episode for every single person's request or question. And so we're working on a way to categorize and figure out a way that as you jump into the podcast listing on the website, or you're clicking through an iTunes and you're browsing through the episodes and trying to figure out what should I listen to, we're trying to figure out a way to help automatically direct you to the podcast episodes that are best for you at that point in time. Now, I'm going to be doing this in a little bit of a crowdsourcing way. I'm going to be reaching out to you guys and asking you for your help on helping me do this. You guys listen day in and day out, and I've even had some listeners, Robin out there, if you're listening, I'm talking to you, who have sent me these great lists of, oh my gosh, if you're working on this is a great episode. And she's almost written an entire encyclopedia on outlining all the different episodes and where you can get resources for this or where you can get help with that. And I know so many other of you out there are picking up some of these same lessons from the episodes. And so I'm reaching out to you guys to ask for some help with this. Again, if you have ideas on how to do this, or if you have ideas on how you think it would be best organized for you, send those all to podcast@successfulfashiondesigner.com. But I will also be reaching out. If you're on my email list, you will be hearing from me very soon with some questions and some ideas on how we can better categorize this to get you exactly the content that you need right when you need it, instead of having to dig through a million episodes. So there are some of the updates. Again, watch for an episode every other week with interviews. And then in between those, on the off weeks, sometimes we'll be taking a week off, but sometimes we'll be scheduling a mailbag episode. So again, you can send your questions in to podcast@successfulfashiondesigner.com. And also be sure to check out the Patreon page for extra bonus behind the scenes content, tons of little bite-sized snippets of information, videos, written content, audio clips in there. That's always at patreon.com/SFD. Thanks so much for listening, you guys. I really appreciate each and every one of you and your continued support. I can't believe we're almost at a year of the show. It's a really exciting time to get to and a great milestone. I'm really proud of all the support you've given me and all the success stories I've heard from each and every one of you who have taken insights you've learned from the show and applied them to your fashion career and used actual action tips that we've shared in this podcast to help you get ahead. I love hearing from you. So again, don't be afraid to reach out anytime with anything, whatever you have to say. I want to hear from you. Podcast@successfulfashiondesigner.com. That is it, you guys. I will talk to you soon. Have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.